This is Singapore, the fourth richest country in the entire world, and the financial hub of Southeast Asia, and the least corrupt country in the whole world. The people of Singapore are known to be most healthy, educated, and productive people in the world. But this is not how it was since day one. In 1965, when it got separated from Malaysia, almost 80% of its population was a victim of extreme poverty. 70% people were living in poor slum, and almost everyone was addicted to opium. Drug addiction was so common and unemployment rate was so high that people were always ready to kill each other to get a small change of money. There was a point in history that it felt like the poverty, violence, and corruption are now destiny of Singapore. But then, how did this country achieve so much? How did this small island turn into one of the wealthiest and one of the safest countries to live in today? In this video, I am going to tell you a story of how one man single handedly turned whole destiny of this country. But before we go any further, I want you to subscribe to my channel and also like it, and also press that notification bell so you will be notified every time I post a video. Thank you. Well, to understand this, we have to go back in the time. In the 19th century, there was a company. This company was so powerful that they had their own army. Around 20% of the world's population used to live under its control, and this was East India Company. At that time, they used to trade with all the world through sea, and this is where they earned all of its profit. And this is the same company which ruled over subcontinent for over 100 years until it divided into parts. At that time, the most profitable item on this company's table was Chinese tea. Yes, tea. And they used a horrible method to get this tea. They used to sell unlimited opium to the Chinese people, and opium is a very strong and addictive drug which can cause serious health problems. The opium which they used to grow in northern India. The main route of this company used to go from a narrow place called Strait of Malacca. In just few years, this place became so profitable that almost 50% of the company's revenue used to come from this place. And they had to make it safe. And to do that, it was very important to have its own port. In just few years, to fulfill this purpose, Sir Thomas Raffles built the first port on this island, which was going to be known as Singapore in the near future. The best thing they did was they declared it as a free port, which simply means there were no taxes. Due to its excellent location and tax free policies, this port quickly gained the attention of traders throughout the world. Soon, it was flooded with thousands of ships traveling from China to India and Europe. In 1867, this island became a part of British colonization, as always, but on the other hand, due to the lack of governmental control, this also became a hub of opium, prostitution, and gambling. But now came World War II. I think World War has become a part of every single story from past few months. As I was saying, now came World War II. In 1941, Japan attacked Singapore, and by 1945, this part of Southeast Asia was left in ruins. And in the midst of all of this, Britain did not provide any kind of assistance to Singapore. And by the end of 1945, hatred against Britain spread throughout the Singapore. During this time, a person emerged, the hero of our story. And yes, this is the person who was going to change the destiny of Singapore. And this was Lee Kuan Yew. I don't know if I read that right, but Lee was a lawyer by profession. In 1955, he created his own party known as People's Action Party and also won few seats in the election held that year. He soon started getting famous and gained enough popularity to become the president of Singapore and Malaysia in 1959. At that time, Singapore and Malaysia were a single country known as Malaya. Just after 3 years of him being a prime minister, Singapore got separated from Malaysia. The reason for this separation were same ethnic and religious ground on which the entire continent got separated in 1947 into India and Pakistan. After this division, Lee faced many difficulties. In front of him were people with no identities, submerged in poverty, lacking education, and even without a place to call home. He was ready to go to any extent to lift his people out of this, even if he has to use harsh methods. First of all, The Lee government abolished social unrest by making free speech illegal. People who used to do protest, any kind of violence, and drugs were given severe punishments. Also, people speaking against the government was sued, and those spitting chewing gums in public places were also punished. While this seems pretty harsh, but surprisingly, this got pretty good results. The political and ethnic tension started to decrease. Lee once said that as long as people are happy, they wouldn't even care about anything else. But this was just a beginning for Singapore. At that time, the biggest economic issue the Singapore was facing was housing. Around 70% of Singaporeans used to live in slums. And to overcome this, Lee passed a controversial law, and by this law, the government was able to buy any land on cheap rates. After buying this cheap land, government started building housing. And to make it easy for people to buy these houses, Lee passed another law. By this rule, 25% of everyone's salary was deducted and included in the central provident fund, and the other 25% was provided by the government. By this 50% saving, now every individual was able to buy a house. And even today, almost 80% of Singapore's population live in government built houses. After solving the housing issue, the next major issue was less job opportunities. And Singapore did not have any kind of natural resources, and no neighboring country wanted to trade with it. Lee understood this, and he knew that the only solution to this problem was to get the foreign investors in Singapore. To do this, the taxes were lowered, regulations were almost eliminated, and it was announced that any foreign company in Singapore won't have to pay a single tax for the first 10 years. And not paying taxes? In the business world, it's like stumbling upon a treasure chest in today's world. Let's take America for a example. The biggest problems the Americans face today are taxes, aren't they? I mean, Americans worry about their taxes more than they worry about running out of coffee. It's like Uncle Joe hovering over them like a bee all the time with a hefty tax bill and reminding them of their civil duty. Sometimes I think that the American dream is also paying taxes. I mean, well, after this policy, hundreds of companies started investing in Singapore. In just 10 years, the unemployment rate of Singapore went to 0%, and the growth rate went up to 13%. Lee knew that corruption can destroy countries. Take Pakistan for instance. And to tackle this problem, he passed strict laws. Anyone who was caught with a corruption case was given a death penalty straight. And not just this, they increased their salaries of the government officials 10 times. No country in the world pays as much as Singapore pays their government officials. Let's take US police officer for example. A police officer in the United States earns from 4,000 to $7,000 per month. And on the same hand, a police officer in Singapore earns from 18,000 to $22,000 per month. Even a janitor earns more than a police officer in the United States. And because of this, Singapore now has the least corruption rate in the entire world. Lee also knew that the human capital was the most valuable resource than anything else. He established technical schools and paid huge prices to the foreign companies to come to Singapore and train the locals, envisioning a skilled local workforce. The results? Singaporeans became one of the hardest working labor force, earning more and contributing to government pension funds. With this surplus, the government invested in state of art hospitals, roads, schools, and infrastructure. Because of this, Singapore's infrastructure is one of the best in the entire world. Since 1980, Singapore has ventured into various markets like petroleum, chemicals, pharmaceuticals, advanced computer components, shipbuildings, and many, many more. Today, Singapore stands as the world's third largest petroleum trading country. Today, Singapore is one of the world's wealthiest countries. It has the second busiest port and a thriving economy. And Singapore is one of the easiest countries in the world to do a business with. The people of Singapore have world class healthcare, education, housing, anything else, you just name it. And all of this because of one single man who truly loved his nation by his heart. Not for money, not for fame, not for anything else, only for his nation. His policies might not be perfect in the eyes of the world, but they were perfect for Singapore, and that's all that matters. On the other hand, it's this piece of land which has natural resources. more beautiful places than Switzerland, more population than China, more hardworking people than anywhere in the world. But we're still far behind all of those nations which got freedom with us or even after us. The reason? I guess we all know. It's simply the hatred towards each other. Instead of investing on people, health, education, infrastructure, road, or government invests on hatred. 80% of our GDPs are invested on our armies and are invested to make our armies stronger than each other. What? For nothing. We might have the best armies in the world, but what about our living conditions? What about homelessness? What about poverty? What about increasing death rates? What about raping children? We troll each other all day long sitting on our phones, but we still know both of us are going nowhere with this mindset. Well, the case study of Singapore is a testament of how leaders shape our lives. If not for Lee, half of the population of Singapore might have just died with the overdose of opium, and the others might have just killed each other. It would be nothing more than an abandoned island. Maybe Israel might have taken over it, but that's a different story. This is where I end this video. Today's video was a very special for me. It made me learn so much about how leaders are making their countries go from this to this and how leaders are destroying my country day by day. If you have liked my video or have gained any kind of lesson from it or have learned anything about the world, please subscribe and like this video and also comment how we can change this world. I know Indian audience is watching this. I know my Pakistani people have watching it. I know there are American people out there watching my channel. I want you all to comment down there about how we can as humans get together and live a better life. Thank you very much. See you in the next video. Don't forget to subscribe.